Hello, dear viewers. My name is Icarix, and this lovely man is Kunagooses, who you might not be able to see, but you'll just have to take my word for it. Anyway, welcome back to the channel.
Hi there.
He's flipping the finger at me, and I'm crying internally, but whatever. My feelings don't matter.
Yes. Anyways, hi there. Yes, welcome back. So, we are fighting a battle,
Yes, I know, we are fighting a battle, but what kind of battle? That's the interesting thing.
That's what I'm trying to recall. We're fighting against, looks like it's Armenia we're fighting against.
Good old Armenians.
Yes, the good old Armenians. So it's our army against their army, basically. Got our Indian elephants, Indico Elefantes. Got our spear line, or probably a mix of Thereo spears and Galatian mercenary spears. Because I like that variety.
Yeah, it's a good variety.
And they're both solid.
That's a good sign, I suppose.
Yes, we've got our cavalry here. I'm pretty sure at least one of us are Gallo-Thracian Thereos cavalry.
No, we're pretty spread out there. Should give us a tactical advantage.
Well, yeah, no. Yes. And the meteor elephants are engaged. And of course, trying to move them around, because the thing about elephants is the way to best utilize them is to keep them moving.
Why is that?
Because if they're in a prolonged minute engagement, they'll start taking casualties.
Well,
and
I
the thing
suppose
is,
so, yeah.
they have high mass. So the whole point is, with units with a lot of mass, they can move through other units with less mass. And the elephants moving through is what does a lot of damage.
This is probably a stupid question, but wouldn't elephants be better off wearing armor to protect themselves, or is it because of the fact that they're so heavy in weight that armor wouldn't be such a good idea for them?
Well, let's put it like this. Elephants... So this is a history question now. Oh boy, okay. So there's evidence that elephants were armored. But it would weigh them down a bit, probably. Make things quite hot. But it's also really, really expensive.
Well, I figured this much. I mean, like, for what they would consider a very effective and heavy attack force, it would probably cost an awful lot to make armor just to get them through the battlefield. Because, yeah, you do bring up a good point.
So, yeah, elephants were armored to some extent. But you're probably talking, I'd reckon, and again, I'm not someone any major sources I can quote offhand to say for sure. Well, my general understanding, I would say probably most elephant corps were probably not particularly armoured, and probably some had armour, but it probably depended a lot on the circumstances. But yeah, because elephants, you could kind of say they probably don't fully need armour. They're big, fearsome, terrifying beasts that can do a lot of damage on the battlefield without armour.
But like
of course,
you mentioned,
armor
they can't
gives
really...
plenty of protection. It can give sufficient protection.
Yeah, but like you mentioned,
useful.
they also can't really be stationed in one place.
Well, I'm talking about in the game.
Well,
I was talking
about both,
so for gameplay purposes, yeah, especially with the way DEI does things, it's not ideal for them to be in a prolonged engagement because they'll start taking damage and casualties. You'd want to keep them moving around because that's where they, just because of their mass, they're able to do a lot of damage to just move around units.
Okay.
And those are just an unarmored version of elephants, but you know, and armored elephant units are going to be also expensive.
I think I was also like talking about both in-game and historical. It was a question for both of those.
Well, so in-game, there are armored elephants. They're also expensive and they take a while to get access to.
Of course.
These unarmored ones are a little bit easier to access, and I just wanted the variety of having some more lesser armored variety forms. So, yeah. There's not much to say, you know, historically, they were armoured to some extent, but probably didn't really need it so much. And even here, armour isn't all that major for elephants. It's useful, but not that significant.
But what about in colder regions? I assume the heavy armor would be a little less strenuous on them, seeing as how, like, it might help keep them warm from frostbite. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think it's going to... Because elephants wouldn't have really been fighting in colder regions.
No, this is more or less just speculation on my part.
I don't know, and I'm not sure armour would be that much of a heat difference for things or anything like frostbite in a colder environment. Elephants mainly fought in India and North Africa and the Middle East, really.
Alright then.
It was the bulk of when elephants were utilised. Because
no real reason for them to travel overseas.
Well, the best we could say them being involved in the cold was when Hannibal Barca marched his army from Spain to Italy, and this included many war elephants crossing the Alps. But, you know, and I've heard various claims. I don't know how. I'm not sure which exactly is the case, that most elephants died on the trip or most of them survived the trip. I know shortly after he was in Italy, after the first couple of battles, all of his elephants had died just before Cannae, which was in 216. He was pretty much down to maybe one or no elephants by that stage. So there were no elephants used at the Battle of Cannae. Not like he needed the elephants, because he still smashed the Romans regardless. He had elephants at Zama, but they didn't get to do much good. He charged them out, and the Romans did a combination of blowing loud trumpets to confuse them and created openings, kind of gaps in their formation. So the elephants would go through those gaps, where then they just converge and kill the elephants and the mahouts. So they didn't really have much of an impact at the Battle of Zama.
It was minimal at best.
Oh yeah, and Zama was the only battle that Hannibal lost in that, only major battle that he lost in the Second Punic War.
Even though he had most of the advantages.
Well, by that stage he lost a lot of his advantages. The Romans outnumbered him, granted, I think they did. I actually don't remember in that case did he outnumber them, but the Romans outmatched him in cavalry to some extent because they had access to Numidians, and the Numidians betrayed Carthage by that point. Well, it's a bit of a simplification. It's a bit more complicated than that, but the gist is the Numidians ended up joining Rome. So that meant Hannibal lost access to some of the finest light cavalry you could get in the ancient world. What else? He had a bunch of fresh mercenaries and citizen conscripts in his army, but there wasn't enough time to properly train them. He still had his veterans. They were probably his ace, you could say, in the whole, maybe, were his veterans from the Italian campaign. So his whole strategy was to hope that his cavalry could buy time, because knowing they were at the disadvantage, he basically hoped that they would just delay the Roman cavalry long enough, and that his first two lines, the conscripts and mercenaries, would exhaust the Romans enough that by the time his veterans got involved in the fighting, they could turn the tides and at the battle win. And it almost worked. Almost.
So it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, basically.
Kind of what basically happened was, again, battles are kind of unpredictable in reality, so...
Of course.
So what happened was, again, he was hoping for his cavalry to delay the Roman cavalry enough. But, so from what I understand, there was a bit of maybe a lull in the battle, and the two sides just kind of had all their remaining troops into like one rough group, just in a big clash. And it seemed like Hannibal's forces were getting the edge. Were kind of about maybe almost beating the Romans a bit. And then the Roman cavalry came behind and struck Hannibal's forces, causing them to rout, and he lost the battle.
Smart move on their part, though.
You see, Hannibal was up against a man known as, well, we call him Scipio Africanus. That was the name he was given after that battle. His name was
called before?
Publius Cornelius Scipio. The reason why we call him Africanus in part is because his father's name was Publius Cornelius Scipio.
Well, it definitely sounds better and a lot more intimidating if he defeated Hannibal, you know, so it adds a nice ring to it.
Yeah, Scipio the Younger. So he fought a few battles. He survived, I think, a couple of battles against Hannibal. And I think his father was, I think, at least one of the main Roman officers or generals in some of these battles. Alright. So, Publius Cornelius Scipio the Elder, again, I'm trying to go by my memory here, so it's a bit hazy. He was basically someone who he was an established Roman politician and thus a general. He fought a few battles against Hannibal. I think he may have been killed in one of them. And Africanus was his son. And he was kind of seems a very savvy and clever fellow. Who,
I mean, like, it definitely sounds like it.
He's
not what you're describing.
Yeah, so he's the one, I think, who decided to lead a military expedition into Spain to kind of cripple the Carthaginians a bit, weaken their holdings in Spain and their access to Spanish silver.
Was he like a master strategist?
I don't think he was a master. He was just a very clever young man. He was quite young at the time. I think in his 20s.
He definitely seemed to have a lot of training or experience.
Well, I think he had a certain talent, and the fact that he also was able to learn from Hannibal in that sense.
I mean, like, that's a massive achievement in and of itself, you know. So he must have, you know, learned it from something, I suppose.
I suppose he would have learned enough of experience of dealing with Hannibal. And you also, in fairness, don't just have to credit him, but also credit Quintus Fabius Maximus, the Delayer, as he was called, Cunctator. He was a dictator, and when I say dictator, I mean this in a formal office sense. It was an actual office in the Roman Republic.
Not like a dictator with a capital D, basically.
Well, dictator was it was a very special political office that was only established in case of emergency.
Until it became something a lot worse down the line, but
eventually,
go ahead.
But the basic idea was this. So, the Republic is in crisis. So, the way the Republic was run is that you had your Senate, but you had the two leaders, perhaps, at the Senate, the consuls, both with equal powers. Because Romans are very averse to giving one person absolute power. But in cases of emergency, they would appoint what was called a dictator, or what we say dictator. This was one man with absolute power, more or less. But it was only for a temporary amount of time, and then he would give that power back once he was
So
done.
it was more for like a state of emergency
Yeah.
than something that was supposed to replace everything.
Basically, in state of emergency, we have this one man who everybody answers to, and then when the emergency is over, he goes back to doing whatever he did before.
Sure, it sounds more like their version of martial law or martial order, where it's like...
Yes, kind of, yeah. So, the one of the most famous and kind of noted examples of a dictator gone right was a man.
Sure, it kind of makes you wonder if
that's
that's where martial law and order originally came from. You know, like those original structures.
I don't know, maybe, but one of the more famous and noted examples of a dictator in the right way was a man known as Cincinnatus or Cincinnatus. This might have been maybe in one of the Rome's wars with the Samnites, I don't remember, but the story goes that he was appointed dictator for about maybe 6 months, accomplished the goals, defeated the enemies, and basically went, right, that's it, I'm done, job's done, and went back to his farm, or something to that effect. You know,
Succinct, but to the point.
the gist here is he's a man who took on the position, did his job. After that, he went back to doing what he did before. Gave that power back. So, now Fabius also largely adhered to that, but the key thing about Fabius is that he advised a strategy that worked, but really, really upset the Romans. Which goes into his name, the Delayer. He recognized that to go and take on Hannibal up front was a disaster. Because if you take him head on, he's going to pick the battlefield and he's going to dominate. That's what happened at Trasimene and Trebia. I think Cannae had yet to happen. And then what happened was, I think the Romans really didn't like that whole approach. So I guess rather say, he advised to avoid fighting him head on. Kind of shadow him a little bit. Make things difficult for him, but don't directly fight him unless circumstances favoured the Romans, which it almost never would. Hannibal was too smart to fall into their trap.
Nice to know there was a dictator around who actually took his job seriously. You know?
Yeah, so the thing was therefore to kind of exhaust Hannibal's supplies, you could say, really. A lot of it was that, because he was campaigning in Italy.
Ready for orders.
And
It's a smart strategy, I'll give him that.
It was, but the Romans did not like it.
Why not?
Because the Roman culture was all about this kind of bravado of fighting head on, beating him in battle, kicking his ass.
So they took it as like a form of cowardice or weakness, basically.
Yeah, it was. Because to the Romans, they were a very aggressive culture. I think they were big on, virtus, manliness, which is all about kind of being upfront and aggressive. Even the way that they kind of, they're on the battlefield.
So basically an early version of toxic masculinity, basically.
Maybe
They have to
you
go
could say
all
that,
gung
but
ho with everything.
The key idea is that the Romans were big on upfront fighting. The way they kind of formed their armies was that the youngest and therefore most eager troops were at the front. They were the ones to be at the front who do the brunt of the fighting. Your experienced veterans would be behind them.
So they're basically the weaklings are the weak. In other words, the weaklings are the fresh meat first. Let all the pros hang back safe so that we can kick their asses.
I wouldn't really say that. It's more just let the youngest and most eager guys go to the front. They're the ones eager, really hungry to kind of do the fighting and get the glory. Your veterans can support them from behind, so if things get tough, your veterans will come in to assist.
Yeah, I suppose you could say it like that, but
Well, I think that's the idea, but the fact is that system worked for a long time.
it's a effective form of euphemism. I'll give them that, but at the same time, you can't help but notice that they're intentionally putting the ones who are eager, as you say, to do this in the front lines and leaving the veterans behind, because it's like they're weeding out the less experienced soldiers first. They're weeding them out
To some
first.
extent, it could be that way, but I think that the main purpose was because, well, it gives them experience, and it gives them the glory, and it's just kind of a nature thing with their kind of more aggressive culture. I guess you could say the Romans...
assuming they even made it back alive, that's a big if.
Well, I suppose they generally would have succeeded, and they won a lot of battles that way.
Yeah, they're damn lucky is what they are, you know.
But they were just
so,
really skilled. They had a system that worked, a very well developed system.
I guess what I'm saying is like they're damn lucky the system worked, you know, because if it
But yeah,
didn't,
but I suppose
then
a lot of it would have probably been trial and error. Also, they fought a lot of wars.
I guess you can't argue with that.
The thing with the Romans also is that they were known for being is extremely stubborn.
Oh yeah, I
opponents.
mean, like if they were opposed to a guy who actually came up with battle strategy plans instead of just going gung ho, then yeah, you're gonna have.
Well, I'm
pissed
talking
off
even the fact that
Romans.
when it came to losing, was one of the key things that helped them win the Second Punic War was, no matter how disastrous the defeat and how many casualties they had suffered, they refused to give in. I think it was maybe after Cannae, which was probably their most disastrous defeat. Hannibal sent, I think, some envoys to negotiate terms, and the Romans just killed them. They wouldn't even hear them out. They weren't interested. They didn't care
Not a
how
very
many.
smart move, I gotta
Well,
admit.
it worked, and that was the nature how the Romans fought. It was essentially either they exhaust the enemy into submission, or they're destroyed, or Rome was destroyed. Basically, it was very much kill or be killed, and that was highly unusual because, especially most powers, Hellenistic powers, usually expect you to fight your battles. You know, you fight a battle or two, come to terms, negotiate, all that sort of stuff. So having an enemy that refused to do that and refused to abide by that system, and just kept throwing bodies and bodies until they won, was a bit shocking.
I guess I'm not exactly saying that it wasn't particularly effective for them, because it clearly was, but at the same time there were so many instances where that approach could have backfired on them to the extreme, you know, so they're very...
But there's seldom times supposed that it really did in any major way, and the long term, at the end of the day, they thrived. They continued to thrive.
I suppose it could have backfired, but it didn't.
Could have,
so I
but at
guess
the end
we
of
have
the
to
day,
keep
the
that
reason
in
why they
mind.
kept doing it is because it worked until it didn't. Then they develop a whole different system. You know?
Let me guess, it was because of one failure that they decided to change the system.
Well, I don't know. Again, it's complicated. See, when I say they changed it, I suppose, the evolution from the Republican legions that I've been talking about to the late Republican, what we so-call Marian legions, was long and complicated and more of a series of gradual changes than the results.
Seems like
of
an understatement.
Well, let's just say that the popular narrative has it that the Romans suffered heavy losses fighting against the Cimbrian Teutons, leading to
And what would
Gaius
be-
Marius to reform the legions.
What would be the factual one?
The factual case, over the centuries, with a myriad of different conflicts, the Romans steadily changed how they did things with smaller reforms or changes, like fighting the Second Punic War. They were kind of need to open up recruitment a bit more, so they did open recruitment to more people than just the landowning citizens. And so the state was more inclined to start providing a lot of the equipment they were using. They were steadily beginning to standardize their equipment more. You know, having your Gallic helmets, like the Montefortino helmet, and the Gallic mail shirt, with the Spanish sword, scutum, and all that was becoming more and more the norm for how to equip themselves. You know, I think it was in the Jugurthine War was when they began to adopt the cohort system instead of the manipular system. Essentially, the legions of the Republic, early to mid-Republic, you could say, fought in what was called maniples. Literally means handful. About 120, maybe 160 men per maniple. which was divided into, I think, 2 centuries of about 60 to 80 men or something to that effect. That was replaced with the cohort system, which essentially meant you had more troops in. I think about 480 men in each cohort, except for the first cohort. That had about twice as many men. So a lot of it kind of was steadying over time in response to various situations, because the Romans were still quite pragmatic when it came to war. If something didn't work, they would change it, and sometimes changing their equipment even in response to what others were using was also something they would do. They regularly adopted a lot of foreign equipment, made it their own. I talked about the Spanish sword, as an example. Celtic helmets, Celtic body armor. So my best.
I will say it's probably a good thing the Romans weren't stubborn enough to not take influence from other cultures as well. They seem to me like the kind of people who would probably want to stick rigidly to their own sort of standards and regulations or something, and not take anything from other cultures. I know that's probably not the case.
The fact is they were continually influenced by other cultures. Prior to the system that we kind of know them for using a little bit, with the swords, and they were fighting in a Greek style, which I believe was probably from Etruscan influence. And so the fact is you wouldn't get to where you were. They wouldn't get to the state that they were at if they were not somebody who adapted according to the circumstances. That'd be highly impractical, and you wouldn't succeed as being one of the largest empires in the known world, because you dug in your heels and refused to adapt.
Of course, yeah.
The Romans didn't even develop their own cataphracts and horse archers.
Yeah, I suppose they do have that on them.
When they clashed with the Parthians, they started developing their own cataphract regiments. It seems like fighting the cataphracts of the Seleucids didn't seem to make them want to develop cataphracts. It was the Parthians that did, to my understanding.
Okay. That's one way to go about it, I suppose.
Well, that's what I understand, at least. I'm not aware of the cataphracts of the Seleucids making any major impression on them. Well, I think it was probably the first time they fought against cataphracts, though.
How could they not?
I suppose the only real time they fought against cataphracts of the Seleucids was Magnesia, and that was a bit of a disastrous battle for Seleucids, so probably didn't make that much impact. I'd need to read up on Magnesia.
Sure. If it was a disaster, then yeah, I suppose that makes sense why they wouldn't have that many experience with them. I'm sure they'll want to stay as far away from them as possible.
Again, I need to read up about Magnesia again. I need to read Appian and Livy on it, because they're the main sources we have on the topic of the battle. Polybius' account is lost. I also want to read about the Battle of Panion. That was in, I think, the 5th Syrian War, because that's where cataphracts were used against the Ptolemies, and they were pretty impactful. But anyway, suppose enough history talk for now, though I suppose we did leave some matters a bit
yes,
concluded.
What exactly is going on down here now?
Right, so we are defending a minor settlement from an Armenian attack. It's 2 smaller Armenian armies with our pretty small garrison. So at the moment we are engaging with their cataphracts, which is their general's bodyguard, the royal cataphracts, Basilikoi cataphractoi.
It has some pretty damn impressive armor.
Well, that's the point. That is the point of the cataphract. The name cataphract literally means like to be fully enclosed in armor.
Even the horses, actually.
Yes.
I noticed that.
Yes, that is the thing about cataphracts. That's the name means they are fully enclosed in armor, rider and mount. So yeah, we've just defeated the first, well, effectively beaten back the first wave. We've got one unit of our militia fighting, I think, with our mercenary Cretan archers. But the rest of our infantry are in formation, trying to endure the enemy infantry. So, yes. We have our archers firing what ammunition they have left. I say we're planning to probably use them as a sort of hammer to our anvil.
Smart move.
Whilst they're not good at melee, they can at least do a rear charge, which will affect enemy morale. And having lost out on generals, they're going to be a little bit more fragile.
Yeah?
In that sense, yeah. Having no general means their morale will be worse. So yeah, that's the plan. So it's going pretty okay.
How are the DEI updates coming along?
There's some work being made. I believe they're planning to do some little overhauls to the Caesar and Gaul and Hannibal the Gates campaigns. I think especially as they're trying to kind of revamp a lot of the barbarian factions of those. That's as far as I remember. I don't remember what else is really planned. I think it's coming out around the summertime.
Okay. It's a little bit of a lengthy wait, but I suppose.
Yeah, they didn't release any updates over the winter, interestingly enough.
Were they supposed to?
Usually they do. Usually they do about 2 updates a year, one around the winter, Christmas time, January, and the other is around the summer. But they didn't.
Maybe they might do double the updates.
I don't know.
Summer
The thing is,
rolls
at
around.
this point, there's probably not a lot for them to kind of do, other than just various tweaks and other bits. So there's probably just not enough to do at that stage, and they're probably working on stuff. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's kind of like how Warhammer 3 Shadows of Change got its update, and overall the content looked pretty good, so I ended up buying it. But the Steel Faith Overhaul mod is still a ways off from any real update. Venris, the main developer, said that they were in the middle of a big update when Shadows of Change patch 4.2 came out. So they decided it'd just be too much hassle and not really worth reverting stuff to make a workable build for 4.2 and all that. So they decided they would release a beta, which will be in a few days time as of this recording, which by the time this video comes out will be ages back. We're really dating this now, but yes. The full release of SFO is planned to be around maybe shortly before or after Thrones of Decay's release, which is about late April. It is currently March 6th. Tells you the stage we're at now with recording and getting this done. But yes, so it's in that kind of vein. Sometimes they just know which point they probably want to work on other stuff. So yeah, as far as I remember, there's some little overhauls or reworks planned in those campaigns, and just adjusting how barbarian factions probably look. Probably a few more tweaks and stuff, but that's as far as I remember. At least I just don't recall anything else that's of note. I know like the current build of DEI that we're working with now, the Seleucid Thrail Swords got a visual update.
But that's about it, honestly.
And also that the Syrian elephants are actually put into the faction roster rather than just being area of recruitment, replacing the Indian armored elephant units they used to have. But that's at least for the Seleucids. I just don't remember anything else of note on the top of my head. I've
That's
probably
alright.
been paying super close attention to the DEI server, and mostly it's just to see Izuru Alexandros' mod, any updates and that. He posts updates in terms of what he's working on. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see when that's done. I like to see his cataphracts, because he's got some nice look for the cataphracts going.
Yeah?
Yeah, where I'm at in the campaign here now is that at the thorax reforms, which means I have access to the cataphracts, and I don't know, I just thought they looked a bit dull.
Okay.
So I like the look of them that he's going for at the moment. So yeah, so it'll just be interesting to see what will happen in that regard and what's happening. Yeah. So disbanded a unit of Scythe chariots to get a more experienced version there.
I see we're working on the Spears of Ares right now.
Oh yes, go to Ares.
Ah,
I believe
I don't know if it's correctly pronounced Ares or Ares.
Well, Ares would be closer to how they say it in Greek. Ares.
Ah,
Um,
sure. Accuracy above all else. That's the key.
well, that's certainly my thing for the most part. To some extent, I'm big on that where I can. But yes, I think he might be a Thracian deity. I don't know. I think I read that. I need to look into more of his origins to some extent, but I think he might have some Thracian connections.
Okay then.
I think some Greek gods were like foreign imports, you might say.
Ready for battle.
I think Aphrodite might be connected to some Near Eastern gods. I know Athena was probably what we call a pre-Greek goddess. So worshipped by the kind of non-Indo-European speaking inhabitants of Greece, what we call Greece, before the Indo-Europeans arrived.
I see right here we're planning to put down some damn dirty, rebellious slaves.
Yes, we are. So we have our army here, a mixture of some Indian longbowmen, Syrian archers, and probably some Cretans. Yep. We have our pikes, our mix of silver and bronze shields.
The rebellion dies with you today.
We've got our Thereoporoi. We have our Hetyroi and the Gamer, probably. I think that's the Hetyroi. I always struggle to discern the two.
Yeah?
I need to get
How come?
used to, I just need to get used to looking at each unit and determining which is which. I know, like, in the thorax forms, they're night and day differences. But pre-reforms, I kind of need to figure that out.
You do that then.
Because I've said the late Agama, so that's the Agama there, so the ones I looked at were the Hetyroi. Because the late version of the Agama become basically cataphracts, which makes them really powerful.
Well, our forces are pretty spread out. Looks like we have a fighting chance.
Well, obviously we have a chance. The odds are overwhelmingly in our favour. It's like a half-depleted rebel army of low-tier units.
Oh, yeah, they're dead.
Oh yeah, obviously. So yeah, our archers running away. Whilst we're trying to
It's a
move
pretty
our ships
shit
around.
rebellion, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, well, you know, you ever elephants moving around?
Indian elephants?
Syrian.
Syrian.
They're
Damn.
basically just Asian elephants, but kind of bigger.
Can never get them right.
Well, put simply this, Seleucid elephants are all going to be Asian elephants.
Ah, okay.
In terms of the game, the unarmored elephants are all going to be Indian.
Oh, okay, okay. I'll
And
be
then-
sure to keep an eye out for that.
And then the elephants we have here
difference.
are the really kind of flashy armor types. They're the Syrian. Now we do get some Indian armored elephant, local Indian armored elephants. You might see them around, but yeah, that's the way it works. The Syrian elephant is just like I think it's just a bigger Asian elephant. But the Seleucids were breeding. You know, some larger Asian elephants to make them a bit more, so they're a bit more fearsome, I believe. But yeah.
Would the slave rebellion have a would these slavers have a would these rebels have a general with them by any chance?
They
I'm
would.
assuming they do.
They do. They would have a general, yeah. They need
Okay.
a general because that's the way armies work in Rome too.
Ah,
So it's centered on a general and his bodyguard. There's the
Oh,
general
Roulette.
there
okay, well, looks like he's fucked, so...
with the satrap guard spearmen unit. So they're shieldless armored spearmen with bows. But yeah.
Well, I have to say, this isn't so much of a last stand for the rebels as it is just a final defeat.
Oh yeah.
Not the best way to go down, I have
I
to
think I
say.
just wanted to fight a nice battle. Then auto-resolve it, that's why I chose to fight it. Wouldn't have needed to auto-resolve it.
Nah, all the same, bit of a rough way to go down.
Oh yeah.
Sure, that's warfare for you, I suppose. It's so sad we didn't even need to see the final blow. It's too embarrassing for them.
Ready for orders.
But yeah. It's looking like we have to end it here now.
Alrighty, so.
On the move.
Yeah. This was a bit of a longer video, so I hope you enjoy that.
Yes, we hope so indeed. Until next time, as always, be sure to leave a comment, like and subscribe, and of course we will see you all when we see you.
Indeed. Thanks for watching.